How did somebody you know ruin their life in one day? Story 1. I still remember that fateful day like it was yesterday. A close friend of mine, whom I'll call Mike, managed to ruin his life in a single day. Mike had always been ambitious, driven, and well-respected in our community. He had a loving family, a successful career, and he seemed to be on the fast track to an even brighter future. But one day, everything changed. Mike received a lucrative job offer in another city, one that would require him to relocate. Although he was initially excited about the opportunity, the pressure to make a decision quickly began to weigh on him. In his desperation to escape the stress, he turned to alcohol as a means of coping. On that fateful day, Mike decided to go drinking with some friends. He kept telling himself that it was just a one-time thing, and that he would make a decision about the job offer when he was more clear-headed. But as the night wore on, he became more and more intoxicated, and the lines between reality and his alcohol-fueled haze started to blur. It was well past midnight when Mike decided to drive home. In his drunken state, he was in no condition to be behind the wheel, and his friends tried to convince him to call a cab or let one of them drive. But Mike insisted that he was fine, and he stubbornly got into his car. Only a few blocks from his home, Mike lost control of his car and plowed into a nearby storefront. The impact was severe, and he was rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. The store owner, who had been closing up for the night, was also injured in the crash. Mike's life was never the same after that night. He lost his job, his family, and his standing in the community. He faced criminal charges and a mountain of medical bills, and he spent years trying to rebuild his life. But the damage was done, and he could never fully escape the consequences of that single life-altering decision. Wow, this story hits hard. It's a painful reminder that even the most successful and well-intentioned people can make life-altering mistakes when under immense stress or pressure. I think it's important for all of us to remember that we're only human, and that sometimes we need to lean on others for support when faced with challenging decisions. In Mike's case, it's heartbreaking to think that one night of trying to escape his stress led to such a tragic outcome. Maybe next time he's trying to escape his problems, he could just watch a Marvel movie or something. Story 2. More like a day horribly altered my life. I was a teacher and coach. For a field trip, the principal could not afford 2 buses. So I had to walk about 10 girls to the field trip location and back to school, while the one bus was filled with the rest of the junior high students and faculty, about a mile each way. I chose the girls of my team because they would listen to me outdoors, unlike lots of middle school kids. While crossing the street in the crosswalk with the walk signal in our favor, all the kids went first, and like girls, they were clumped together and chatting while walking. I noticed a woman made a left turn into our crosswalk and never saw us as she tried to accelerate to beat an oncoming car. I knew she was going to run right through the girls. I pushed the kids forward very forcefully. Most of the girls fell onto the pavement in front of other vehicles waiting at their red light. They were badly scraped up, like road rash from me pushing them, but no hospitals or doctors were needed for their scrapes. I don't remember the impact, and I can't remember stuff clearly from when I got hit. All I can remember is that I couldn't get up. They say my body went up the car and off the driver's side, tearing the side mirror off the car and breaking her windshield. Horror and sobbing from my student athletes. The girls raised me onto a backboard when the ambulance came, which must have been traumatic. Now, 20 years later, I am still an ambulatory wheelchair user. I can't teach or coach, and I can't work at a desk. Oh, and yeah, I have chronic pain. My life can be really sucky, but I would not change what I did that day. When I get low emotionally from all my limitations, I remember those girls. I watched them go to college, get married, grow into mothers, and hold impressive jobs in their fields. And when they show a photo on Facebook of their happy moment, it recharges me to know they are safe, healthy, and happy. And it reaffirms my decision to save them from harm. Oh, it's incredible to think about the split-second decision you made to save those girls, even though it ultimately altered your life in such a profound way. Your selflessness and bravery are truly admirable, and I'm sure those girls will be forever grateful for the sacrifice you made for them. It's also a powerful reminder that life can change in an instant, and we never truly know what challenges we might face. Your strength and resilience in dealing with your chronic pain and the limitations that came with your injury are an inspiration to us all. Story 3. A friend of my parents was a good family man who loved his family. One day he was playing with his toddler and was playfully tossing her on the bed. She would get back up, giggling, and he would toss her again. In one of the tosses, he threw her a bit too far, and she hit a bedpost. She lived, but became bedbound, unable to even talk. Not quite vegetable, but close. He went to jail for child abuse, lost his wife and his job, and his little girl would never be the same. The guilt was so much that he offed himself in the prison as soon as he could. Story 4. A buddy from high school blew through a stop sign and hit a couple of motorcyclists, killing them both. He didn't stop to render aid and fled the scene. He was busted for vehicular manslaughter and spent 12+ years in prison. He's lucky he can work for his dad because where he lives now is not kind to felons trying to rehabilitate. Story 5. A week ago, my little sister slipped on the ice as she got out of her car and hit her head. She didn't think much of it when she had a pounding headache later, figuring she just whacked herself well. Her friend told her to just sit down and take it easy, until she started slurring her words roughly 10 hours after the fall. They called an ambulance for her, but she was going into cardiac arrest. Turns out she'd stopped taking the blood thinners she was supposed to be on for clotting issues. The headache wasn't the fall, it was the clot in her leg cutting off blood to the brain. At the age of 26, she never recovered and leaves behind a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Story 6. In college, my ex's friend was pulled over for speeding. He had drugs and alcohol in his system, and when the cop reached into his truck to grab the keys, he panicked and took off, thinking the cop would let go. The cop did not let go and was dragged for quite a ways before eventually falling to the ground and hitting his head. My ex's friend was charged with capital murder and sentenced to 20 years in a Mississippi state prison. 21 years old and ruined his entire life in one night. Jeez, I can only imagine that. It's heartbreaking to think that a young man with his whole life ahead of him made a series of mistakes that led to the death of a police officer and a 20-year prison sentence. I mean, his life is basically completely ruined thereafter. Story 7. The friend's son was with his recently engaged fiancée who had a serious nut allergy. They were driving not far from Bendigo. They stopped off at a cafe to buy sandwiches. The woman running the cafe assured them there were no nuts anywhere near the sandwiches, so they bought them, and then they went on their way. Driving away from town, she was nibbling on the sandwiches when she struggled to breathe. He stopped the car, got out, figured out what was going on, and went to the back of the car to get her EpiPen, which he struggled to find. But by the time he did find it, she was dead. A couple of weeks after the funeral, he got in his car, drove it back to the stretch of roadside where she died, put his foot down on the accelerator, and deliberately aimed his car at a power pole. He left his mom a note. Edit. For anyone wishing to blame someone for this, I need to make it clear that the contamination turned out to be an accidental tainting of a bread batch. The cafe owner did not know about it, nor did the bakery until this incident. Story 8. I was standing at a crowded bar when I was in my mid-20s, waiting to get drinks for me and a girl I liked that I had come with. A disagreement between two other guys broke out behind me, but it was so loud I didn't know. The one guy pulled a knife and drunkenly lunged at the other guy. Completely missed, but stabbed me in the right buttocks. I had no idea what happened. It felt like a nerve cluster in my back just randomly exploded. I fell over, and it only occurred to me that I had been stabbed after I saw all the blood. Thank God I was okay overall. Missed a few weeks of work because I couldn't sit or walk. Played a lot of Nintendo DS while laying down. The guy served a very light sentence, 2 months, after pleading down from attempted murder. He wrote a very sincere apology letter, and I agreed to meet him in person, where he apologized again. At his court case, when I gave a statement, I made it clear to the judge that there was no need to ruin his whole life over a mistake. Heck, my work even covered my wages throughout my absence, and it's Canada, so no medical bills. This was 18 years ago. I snooped the guy on social media every now and then, and he's married now, has kids, a whole career, seems to be doing well, happy for him. Could have been a lot worse. We were both pretty lucky. The worst part was that the girl I came with that night had left with some other dude and had no idea it happened until a mutual friend told her the next day. Wow, what a terrifying experience that must have been. It's unsettling to think that something as innocent as standing at a bar with a girl could lead to such a violent and unexpected incident, and to advocate for a lighter sentence for him. While it's easy to get caught up in feelings of anger and revenge after such a traumatic experience, it takes a great deal of strength and empathy to approach the situation with forgiveness and compassion. Story 9. Middle management type man where I used to work came into the office every other day. He was known to be a stand-up guy, good family man, even a good boss, as good as it gets when it comes to management at least. He got caught having fun with a new hire, lost his job, his marriage, and his kids stopped talking to him. That was 2 years ago. Last news I got, he's living in a studio apartment with a mattress on the floor and already spent half his savings on alcohol. Story 10. There was this guy, let's call him Mark. Mark was a pretty laid-back dude, always smiling and full of life. He was known as the life of the party and had an enviable social circle. One day, Mark found out that he had won a decent sum of money in a lottery. Ecstatic and somewhat in disbelief, he couldn't contain his excitement and decided to celebrate his newfound fortune. Mark figured that one night of unbridled indulgence couldn't hurt, so he gathered his closest friends and invited them in an exclusive nightclub in town. Little did he know that the choices he would make that night would change his life forever. As the night wore on, Mark's inhibitions faded, and he began to make a series of increasingly reckless decisions. He consumed copious amounts of alcohol, engaged in some illicit use, and started to flaunt his wealth in ways that caught the attention of some unsavory characters. In the blink of an eye, Mark went from being a fun-loving, happy-go-lucky guy to a person who had lost control of his life. It wasn't long before the law caught up with him. The police arrived at the club, responding to a noise complaint and reports of drug use. Mark, in his intoxicated state, panicked and tried to flee, only to crash his expensive sports car a few blocks away. He was promptly arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including driving under the influence, possession, and reckless endangerment. In the aftermath of that fateful night, Mark's life spiraled out of control. He lost his job, his friends, and his reputation. The legal fees and fines ate away at his lottery winnings, leaving him broke and alone. Story 11. My dad once saw a patient who was a seemingly normal, well-adjusted family man in his early 40s with no major health issues and in good physical shape. He was in town for a business trip and had suddenly gone blind. Come to find out, while out with his colleagues, he had tried H for the first time in his life. It was cut with a something that created a blockage in his optic nerve, and now he's blind forever. That caused him to lose his job. He had a wife and kids and was the sole breadwinner. This story is a distressing reminder of the devastating consequences that can come from making one poor decision. It's difficult to imagine how this man and his family must have felt suddenly losing their main source of income and grappling with the reality of a permanent disability. Story 12. A kid I knew growing up and was friends with was 16, and his friend, who was 15, lured 2 other kids to a field who were 13 and 16, cousins, where they offed them and over money they owed them for funny leafs they got from him. Weren't found for 2 weeks, and only because the one kid showed another kid. Ruined many families and lives that day. This was a shock to our entire community. Neither one of the boys who offed them had prior criminal history or any sort of issues anyone knew or picked up on. Story 13. My uncle had a girlfriend who wanted coke. He had this amazing Camaro he had been rebuilding for years. Literally, my entire childhood, I remember him working on this canary yellow Camaro. His girlfriend wanted coke. He sold this car for $10K to get it for her. Once the money/coke was gone, so was she, but he was addicted. He died alone in his apartment a few years later. He was 52. Fuck you, Tamara. Story 14. Had a friend who was a compulsive spender. Buy a $9,000 sports motorcycle, spend $1,200 getting it customized, trade it in 9 months later for $3,000 towards another new one. Guy could probably have a house and be ahead on mortgage with all of the money he spent on stuff he was stupid about. Well, one day he must have put his credit card number into a hot singles in your area scam. Woke up and his bank account had been cleaned out. Needed to move back into his parents' house and declare bankruptcy. Also borrowed $1,000 from me that I never saw a cent of before he ghosted me. Sad thing about the situation is, even though I did want the money back, I had no intention of disowning his friendship. Story 15. I remember the day vividly when someone I knew managed to ruin their life in just 24 hours. Let's call her Lisa. She was a high achiever, always striving for perfection in her work and personal life. Everyone admired her dedication and drive, and she was well liked in our circle of friends. One day, Lisa got a massive promotion at her job, which came with a significant pay raise and a great deal of responsibility. She was ecstatic, and we were all excited for her. To celebrate, she decided to throw a huge party at her place, inviting not only her close friends, but also her new colleagues and supervisors. As the night wore on and people mingled, the atmosphere grew more and more intense. Lisa, feeling the pressure to impress her new coworkers, began to drink heavily. She was usually very responsible, but on this night, she let loose, eager to prove she could fit in with her new peers. At some point in the evening, Lisa became embroiled in a heated argument with one of her supervisors. Fueled by alcohol, the dispute quickly escalated, and in a moment of poor judgment, Lisa threw a drink in her supervisor's face. The room went silent, and everyone stared in shock at what had just transpired. The next day, Lisa was called into her boss's office and fired on the spot. Her actions at the party made it impossible for her to continue working with her colleagues, and she had lost the respect of her supervisors. Word spread quickly about the incident, and soon Lisa found herself struggling to find another job in her field. Her professional reputation was in tatters. As the weeks turned into months, Lisa's life spiraled out of control. Her relationships with friends and family became strained as she struggled to come to terms with her impulsive actions. The once promising career she had worked so hard to build was now a distant memory. It's difficult to watch someone go from being a high achiever to struggling to find their footing in life, all because of a single lapse in judgment. I can only hope that Lisa has been able to find a way to rebuild her life and move past this difficult chapter. It's a good warning for us all to hear to be mindful of the choices we make and the potential consequences they can have, both for ourselves and for those around us. Story 16. Oh, this one is insane. So, my former acquaintance Karen managed to turn her life upside down in just a few short hours. She was a dedicated and successful architect, respected by everyone in our small town. Her latest project was the restoration of an old historic building that would become the new community center. On the day of the grand opening, everyone gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Karen, eager to show off her hard work, led a guided tour for the town's most influential people. However, Karen, usually very thorough in her work, had made a critical oversight in the building's structural integrity. As the group reached the second floor, a sudden and horrifying cracking sound echoed throughout the building. Panic set in, and people rushed to evacuate. In the chaos, several individuals were injured, and the building was deemed unsafe. In the aftermath, it was discovered that Karen had cut corners to save money and time, resulting in the structural failure. She was fired from her job and faced a lengthy legal battle, ultimately losing her license to practice architecture. Please leave your story down below in the comments. I would absolutely love to make a video about them in the future. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.